shall supersede all other laws. The 10th Circuit Court opinion says the source of the authority of Pueblo City here is thus derived directly from the state constitution, and therefore it's not a residual or delegated power. It's not a residual power. It's not a delegated power. The power that Pueblo has is the state power. We have state power here in the city. Pueblo's city charter is the law of the land. We have a constitutional law of government. All laws and rules come out of the Constitution. And by the U.S. and Colorado Constitution, we have created this charter, and this charter supersedes all other laws and rules. So Pueblo City Charter didn't give us implied powers or residual powers or delegated powers. It's straight up state power. It's straight up state power. The charter is the Constitution for Pueblo and all the Puebloan people, deriving its just powers from both the U.S. and the Colorado Constitution. This means that the city of Pueblo is state power. They have the monopoly of violence. They run shit around here. And it also means that the officials aren't obedient to Denver nor D.C., or at the very least, Denver and D.C.'s powers are substantially curbed. As the 1934 case, City and County of Denver v. Henry points out, a city ordinance can supersede a state law regarding local Pueblo city matters. Let me say that again. A city ordinance can supersede a state law regarding local city matters. So the state of Colorado passes a law, and then Pueblo City passes a law that contradicts that law. Guess which law stands? The law that Pueblo passes conquers the law that Colorado State passed. They have state power, and the ordinance actually check the statutes of the state. It's probably true with the feds, too. But this is from 1934 case, City and County of Denver v. Henry. So I have precedent.
Of course, today it's all over, and the young men are trying to forget. But for one day this year, they'll remember. And that one day is Election Day, November 6th, when not only these young men, but Americans of all ages will be thinking long and hard about how to vote for the surest road to peace during the next 4 years.
In the 1962 case, 4-County Metropolitan Capital Improvement District versus the Board of County Commissioners of Adams County, they established that home rule cities in Colorado regarding local matters had complete authority. In other words, municipal policy exercised by a home rule city in Colorado is the equivalent of state action when exercised in connection with municipal affairs. So municipal policy, like I said, it's state power. But more importantly, if there's some conflict, right, if Colorado State and the federal government pass a law and then we pass an ordinance that nullifies that state or federal law, there might be some weird shakeout. They might, in terms of local city matters, that law supersedes. All laws that have to do with local matters here in Pueblo supersede the state and the national federal government. So, there might be an argument. Some people might say, no, the state and the feds are more powerful than the city. Okay, even if you think that that's the case, what is indisputable is any of those matters that doesn't contradict the state or the feds, they can do as the fuck as they please. So we have autonomy. I think my opinion is we have complete, full autonomy. If we can contradict what the state and the Fed statutes are, then unless we write laws that we just ban free speech, if we just banned all guns, if we took one of the Bill of Rights away, or if we tried to have a strong mayor ballot question, if we tried to destroy our form of government here in Pueblo by a simple little, ballot question, you're not acting constitutionally. You're not acting how you're supposed to be acting in this country, because it's illegal.
What are some of their thoughts?
I'm engaged this time, and I'm planning to get married. And I don't want to look forward to military service in war. I want my children to grow up in a country that's in peace. I think that Ike is the man that can do this for us.
1954 was the year that TV was invented, although it was $1,000 when it first came out per TV. But 1954 is what brought TV here. So TV is introduced, not widespread yet, in 1954. 1954 is the year Burger King established themselves in Florida, and Sports Illustrated also arrived in the U.S. in 1954. 1954 saw Burger King and Sports Illustrated, and the television. 1954 was before Elvis Presley was shaking his pelvis. And it was after Charlie Chaplin was disgraced out of the U.S. for alleged communist sympathies. So 1954 is before Elvis Presley, but after Charlie Chaplin. During Marilyn Monroe. For the Red Scare, for the anti-communist Cold War fervor bullshit, McCarthyism was at a fever pitch in 1954.
I will vote for President Eisenhower because I am the mother of 3 children, and I feel with President Eisenhower in command of our country, I can raise my children with great security.
I'm going to vote for Ike because of his outstanding record in the past 4 years, and because I believe through the Republican administration we will have peace and prosperity for my children to grow up for at least the next 20 years.
McCarthy was saying the U.S. Army, there was communists in the Army, there was communists in the CIA. McCarthy was saying there's communists everywhere. He saw communists all over the place. 1954, Eisenhower would sign a law that made the Communist Party illegal in America. So that goes against free speech, doesn't it? Can you just make a political party illegal? Well, yes, Eisenhower signed a law that did that. So the 1950s culture, 60% of white people are middle class. So a lot of people are taking this industrial revolution, this manufacturing base, and they're making good money, and they're able to save a lot of money. There's high taxes. There's a lot of infrastructure projects, and then a lot of cheap goods. So, you know, this newfound wealth, all these cheap goods, high taxes, so the government is investing in the people and in the infrastructure. For a lot of people, for those 60% of white people who became part of the middle class, 1950s was pretty good for them. And that's why they call the 1950s culture a consensus culture. It was a consensus culture because essentially it was very monotonous. It was very one-dimensional. This is the American way of life, right? We are fighting the forces of communism, therefore we're capitalist, so therefore we're putting out Burger Kings, but we're not putting out, you know, any universal health care. It's a consensus culture. So no debate, no dissent. It was all anti-communist. There was 2 people in Pueblo that was thrown in jail for being communist. The American way of life, it was already decided. Here's what American way of life is all about. Consumerism, capitalism, careerism, individuality to an extent. You couldn't be a communist, right? So you couldn't be that much of an individual. But you could invest in private enterprise, so that's why you could have all these corporations coming out of the woodwork.
I served 4.5 years in the United States Army Air Forces and am a great admirer of President Eisenhower in what he did during the war in leading us to victory and what he is now doing to lead us to peace and to hold the peace of this world.
I have an 18-year-old son, and I am so grateful to Eisenhower for giving him an uninterrupted education.
So the consensus culture is very homogenous. And with Ike going around, I would say it was very Christian. They were fighting crusades, and very conservative. So if you complained about anything, hey, what are you, some sort of red? Are you some sort of communist? And maybe the reason why McCarthy was seeing communists even in the Army and the CIA, because communism is popular, and people like the idea of taking care of the poor and taking care of one another. But since he was declaring war on communism, and he did declare war on that idea, And in the long run, it's successful, even though I'm a lefty. Technically, I wouldn't consider myself a communist. I would say I have socialist leanings. I would consider myself an anarcho-syndicalist. But communism, I think, just goes too far one way, whereas laissez-faire capitalism goes too far the other way, and what we need is a synthesis of the two. We need a combination of communism and capitalism, right? Free enterprise, go out there, work, hustle, but also make sure nobody starves to death. So that's already been solved. That was solved a long time ago. That's actually obvious, right? But I guess if you've been fighting the Cold War against communists for 50 fucking years, then the idea of taking care of others, right? The baby boomers are going to be against universal health care. They're against free college. They had free college. But they're going to be against all that, pretending that they aren't communists. But then the moment that Social Security is threatened, hey, wait, you better give us our Social Security checks. What the hell? Social Security, you just want the check to sit around and do nothing? You want to take taxes from working people? That's commie. What a commie. You're such a commie. If you take Social Security, that's the communist idea. Is that not welfare? But enough about hypocrites and hypocrisy.
Reasons for the military intervention.
In the South as elsewhere, citizens are keenly aware of the tremendous disservice that has been done to the people of Arkansas in the eyes of the nation, and that has been done to the nation in the eyes of the world. At a time when we face grave situations abroad because of the hatred that communism bears toward a system of government based on human rights, it would be difficult to exaggerate the harm that is being done to the prestige and influence, and indeed to the safety of our nation and the world.
George L. Williams, is the first Parks and Rec director. He's the one that built the golf course out by the airport and a whole bunch of parks. He unified the Parks and Recreation Department, which was able to be done after the 1954 cleaned Pueblo up. After they got a charter, after they got one set of rules for which everybody was going to follow along, they implemented a system of taxation. With that increased revenue, they were able to invest in more infrastructure projects. They built 4 schools, including Ben Franklin Elementary and Freed Middle School, and another elementary, one which failed. The other one, which name escapes me, but 4 schools was constructed. I-25 was constructed. The airport was up in operation. The golf course to the airport was actually more profitable than the airport itself. But 1954 got the airport up and going. June 1st, 1954 was when the first commercial flights were stopping in Pueblo. So 1954 saw the airport. 1954 saw I-25. 1954 saw Parks and Recreation all consolidate. Better taxes, better infrastructure, better system. And 4 schools. They're creating schools. This school, that school. There was a police chief. He was a police chief from 1952 to 1967.